Now, ask yourself what would happen if you played multiple rounds of Prisoner's Dilemma. So in the last introductory video, what we looked at was what happens when you play at one time. And the choice that you have to make if you only have one time, obviously trust is a major concern. And since agreements are not enforceable, you have to really consider that trust and how far that trust goes, and also thinking of eliminating the worst possible outcome. But if you were to play the game in multiple rounds, it changes the complexion of the game a little bit in one case, and it can change it quite a bit in another. So in two scenarios, or two variants, one of the things that can happen is that player A and player B can play 10 rounds of Prisoner's Dilemma. And in this first version, only the last play counts. So in other words, you will play 10 rounds, but it's only round 10 that matters. So think of the first 9 as a practice. Now, notice that player A starts out silent and player B starts out silent. So what they're doing is perhaps trying to signal to each other that they want to cooperate with each other and that they want to have honor among thieves. In the original version of Prisoner's Dilemma, remember, the two prisoners had no way of talking to each other. In this case, they still don't. So the only way they can try to broker a continued sense of trust or a deal between them is to communicate whether they stay silent or confess. So round 2, they continue. And the outcome, of course, is 1 year in prison, 1 year in prison. So round 3, the same, and on down. The problem happens when you get to round 10. Because if you remember, only round 10 counts. So it's the result of round 10 that will decide the outcome of the game. And in spite of a long laundry list of trying to cooperate, we noticed that both players chose to confess. So it's almost like they were only playing one round. So in spite of all of this attempt to provide evidence of cooperation, why confess? Well, in this case, because round 10 is the binding round, right? It's the round that matters most. And the fear is that the opponent could have been trying to soften the opponent up, the other player up, to stay silent while ultimately defecting from that cooperation. So confessing and then possibly attaining the best outcome for himself of 0 years in prison, which also has the unfortunate possibility of giving his opposing player 10 years in prison. And notice that because neither player felt they could trust the other to be truthful or to his word, they both confess. And so we wind up with basically the same outcome as if we only played this one round. So the issue of trust once again reemerges in this version of the game. So in this one, in the second version of a multiple play game, there's an aggregate count. So in other words, the choice with the most plays will be the choice that ultimately decides what the outcome of the game is. So this allows for multiple repetitions of the game to have an influence on each other. So while these two players can't necessarily communicate to each other in long sentences or something, they can signal to each other by their choices. And so we start off the game with player A remaining silent, but player B confessing, wondering what the first player might do. And player A, once again, is trying to signal to player B, hey, I'm trying to cooperate with you. I want to be helpful to you. And player B, in this case, decides, oh, well, player A I made a mistake, so I best confess, because player A is now going to change his vote based on my last one. Stupid me. And player A doesn't and stays silent, once again trying to indicate that he's going to stay silent and try to cooperate. But after 2 times in a row, player A is not sure if player B is going to get the hint, so player A confesses, while player B figured it out and remained silent. In which case, both players say, all right, I think player B's got it. Player B is like, I'm going to try it one more time. And both remain silent. And then remain silent for the rest of the game. So we have the first 3 plays, right, that have that conflict. But the rest, they've managed to use previous rounds of the game to rebuild their trust and understanding and communicate their play to the other player. And realizing that they both choose to stay silent, and while they don't get the best outcome of 0 years in prison, they both avoid, in this case, the worst, and it's because of the ability to communicate in multiple rounds of the game, so that whatever the outcome of the most rounds of the game is the thing that decides who, the final outcome.